When you think about why flying is so incredibly safe, your mind probably jumps to powerful jet engines or super strong wings or flawless computers. And yeah, all that stuff is crucial. But the real secret, the thing that truly revolutionized aviation safety, isn't in the hardware. It's in the human software. It's about how the industry finally got to grips with our single greatest variable, the fact that we all make mistakes. So, let's get into it. Here's what we're going to cover in this explainer. First, we'll tackle this big idea of the human factor. Then we'll peek inside a pilot's mind to see how it actually works under pressure. After that, we'll dissect the different kinds of errors, and then look at how the entire crew is designed to act as one big safety net. And finally, we'll see how these lessons can be applied pretty much everywhere. All right, first things first, we have to start with a concept that we can all relate to, right? To err is human. We all know the saying, but when you're flying an airliner at 30,000 feet, accepting our own fallibility isn't just a nice thought. It becomes the absolute cornerstone of the entire safety system. I mean, just listen to this brutally honest confession from a pilot. It's kind of shocking, right? His brain, under pressure, defaulted to a deeply learned routine, driving a car. The problem is, he was flying a plane. This isn't a story about a bad pilot. This is a story about a human brain doing exactly what human brains do. And that's a critical distinction. And this is where the game really changed. For the longest time, the approach to safety was what you'd call the bad apple theory. Something goes wrong, find the person who messed up, blame them, maybe fire them, and problem solved. Right? Well, no. Aviation made a massive philosophical shift. They realized that human error isn't the cause of failure, it's a symptom of a deeper problem. So the question changed from who messed up to why did our system let this happen? Okay, so if you're going to design a system that's resilient to human error, you first have to understand the hardware it's running on. I'm talking about the brain's basic operating system, how we take in the world and make decisions. Think about it. Literally, every single thing a pilot does boils down to this simple three-step loop. You've got input, information coming in through your senses. You've got process, the brain making sense of that info and deciding on a plan. And you've got response, actually doing the thing. It seems really basic, but there are tripwires at every single one of those stages. And this is a textbook example of a failure at that very first step, input. There's this dangerous visual trick called the black hole illusion that can happen when you're landing at night over dark terrain. It messes with your perception and makes you think you're higher than you are, so you fly a dangerously low approach. What's wild is that this pilot knew about the illusion, but his senses were still hijacked by it. It shows just how easily our inputs can be corrupted. Now let's talk about the process stage. Our attention, for all its power, works like a spotlight. It can be intensely focused on one thing, but that means everything else is left in the dark. You've probably heard of the famous invisible gorilla experiment, where people are so focused on counting basketball passes that they completely miss a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene. That's a huge deal for a pilot who's juggling dozens of things at once. And get this. This is something called the vigilance decrement. Studies show that our ability to just sit and monitor a system, especially a highly reliable one, drops off a cliff after only about 15 minutes. It's not because pilots are lazy or complacent. It's a fundamental feature of how our brains work. We're just not built for that kind of sustained, passive attention. So we know errors can happen pretty much anywhere in the process. But, and this is really key, not all errors are created equal. You have to understand the different ways we can fail if you're going to have any hope of building defenses against them. Generally, we break them down into three main buckets. You have slips. That's when you meant to do the right thing, but you just fumbled the action, like hitting the wrong switch right next to the one you wanted. Then there are lapses. That's a memory failure. You just plain forgot to do something. And finally, you have mistakes. This is a big one. This is when your plan itself was wrong from the beginning. Your intention was flawed, and you need different solutions for each of these. This pilot story is a chilling, real-world example of a lapse. He forgot one simple, crucial step, resetting his altimeter to the pressure of the destination airport. That tiny memory failure, meant his instruments were telling him he was 230 feet higher than he actually was. He missed the runway by just 10 feet. A tiny oversight with consequences that are just, wow. Okay, so this brings us to the most important question of all. If we accept that humans, even highly trained professional pilots, will inevitably have slips, lapses, and mistakes, how on earth is flying not a total catastrophe? The answer is as simple as it is brilliant. You turn the crew into a safety system. And that is done with a philosophy called Crew Resource Management, or CRM. This isn't training on how to fly the plane better. This is training on the human skills: communication, teamwork, decision-making, and leadership. It's about how to turn two or more individuals in a cockpit into one single, cohesive, error-catching machine. And this is what CRM sounds like in practice. This captain's pre-flight briefing isn't just them being nice. They are actively creating what's called psychological safety. They're making it not just okay, but expected for the first officer to challenge them. They're basically saying, please be my safety net, and I'll be yours. This gets put into practice with a 3-layered defense system. Think of it like this. Your first best line of defense is to avoid threats altogether, see them coming, and steer clear. But if a threat leads to an error, your second line of defense is to trap that error before it can cause any real trouble. And only if an error slips past that net do you have to go to the last resort, mitigate the consequences to make the outcome as safe as possible. And this chart really shows you the goal. In a well-functioning crew, the biggest bar by far is errors avoided. You see problems coming and you never let them happen. Of the few that do occur, the vast majority get trapped. That last bar, the one for errors that actually lead to an undesirable state that you have to fix, it's tiny because the whole system is designed to catch failures early and often. All right, so let's bring this all back down to earth, because these principles, forged in the high-stakes environment of the cockpit, have incredibly powerful lessons for, well, for all of us, in almost anything we do. You see these ideas saving lives in other fields now. Medicine, for instance, adopted surgical safety checklists directly from aviation. Finance, nuclear power, they're all building systems that assume humans will be human. But it's not just for these high-risk jobs. Think about your own team at work. Are you creating a culture where it's safe to speak up, where you build systems with checks and balances, and where you learn from failures instead of just blaming people? And that really leaves us with one last big question to think about. In our own work, in our own lives, when something goes wrong, what's our first instinct? Are we still just looking for that bad apple to blame? Or are we looking deeper at the system itself and asking how we can make it better? Aviation learned that lesson, and it's a lesson that can make all of us safer and smarter.